So, Doc, when do we go to therapy? Like, how do we know that that's something that we're going to need to do, right? I hit this question quite a bit. Obviously, when people are in therapy, they're here usually because something in their life has completely exploded or imploded, and they need a little help with that. And yet, most of us, when we're sitting across the couch from a therapist, are thinking to ourselves, man, it would have been nicer to be here when I was in a better state of mind. So I could have given them kind of the context and the background. But now when I'm at my worst, I'm going to have to come up with all this. Come on, Doc, there's got to be a better way to do this. Well, I think there is a better way, and I'd like to teach you a better way of thinking about this. For starters, therapy is a lot like looking in a mirror. When you got that one thing in your teeth and you can't seem to get it out till you finally find it by looking in the mirror itself, that's what therapy can do for you. Therapy really is having somebody reflect back to you something you know is there, but in such a way that you finally find it and can get that out of your way. If this is intriguing to you, then keep listening. Welcome. This is how to fix your sucky life. That's right. Maybe you're somebody who says, so life sucks. Now what, right? Fix me, Doc. I don't know what to do with all of this. This is a podcast that teaches anybody who's interested in learning a little bit more about how to get control of the anxiety in their life, the stress in their life, all of those feelings that are bogging you down. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie Marr, a clinical psychologist of the last 2 decades and a trauma therapist. And I'm here to help you understand how things early in our life, things like trauma or really difficult times, impact us later in life, so much so that it drives us off course and into patterns that are not helping us. They don't serve us and they create suffering for us. And there's a lot of information swimming out there. So I know that people are looking to feel better and want to know what works. Why don't we help you fix that sucky life? I take all of the information from neuroscience, my experience over the last 2 decades, and all the fits and starts of my own personal life, and I put it all together in a toolbox for you so that you can stop just surviving and learn how to really thrive in your life. I know it's possible to get there, so let's get started. I'm interrupting this podcast just to thank you for listening. I really enjoy doing this, and it is my passion to make sure that people understand more about mental health and how to create emotional wellness in their life. So please like and follow me wherever you find your podcasts. And I would strongly encourage you to share an episode or 2 with someone close to you that you know could use this information. And if you want to learn a little bit more about what services I provide and you're in the state of Minnesota, or you're looking for consultation or coaching, which I can do outside of Minnesota, head on over to nataliemarrcounseling.com. And there you'll be able to see all the services that I provide and maybe pick up a blog or find another podcast that you want to listen to. Thank you and keep listening. Welcome back, everybody. So today I want to talk a little bit about how do you know when you need to go to therapy? It's an interesting subject matter, and not a lot of us have had to think about it, I think, until we're in a really precarious spot. Like I said in the intro, there is usually, kind of this thing that goes off in our life like a bomb that instigates wanting to come in. It's not usually that we're just looking to, do some personal growth work or personal development work. And to be honest with you, the medical system and insurance is butted up against this belief system that we only go to a therapist when we have a problem. Because if you're going to therapy and you're using your health insurance in order to do it, well, my friends, guess what? That therapist is giving you a diagnosis, has a treatment plan to help you with that diagnosis, and they have to show in their progress notes from week to week or whenever you're going in to see your therapist that they're following through and helping you to attain the goals you have on that treatment plan. Well, for most of us, that isn't until some big bomb goes off in our life. It isn't just because we're feeling a little down or we're not quite ourselves that prompts us to want to go in. But I want to kind of push against that mold, push against that definition, and talk about ways to think about how therapy could be of an advantage to us during times when we're not feeling at our worst. In fact, that's really the best time to approach therapy. And it's usually when you're in this state where there's something in your life that's just kind of a little off, a little stuck. Not unlike what I had just said to you in the intro, looking in a mirror and trying to scratch that little piece of green out from in between your teeth. It's not like we don't know we've got problems. We know we have stuff going on. We just don't think it's risen to the level that needs a therapist. And I would challenge you to think about that's the best time. And here's why. There's two premises that are present that work for therapy. One is that there is a focus. You do want to have a focus. So you do come in either with a problem that you want to have solved or a place that you want to grow in your life, to develop more in your life. So if you have something in your teeth, right, we want to get that out of our teeth. That's the metaphor I'm using here. If you've got some things that are going on in your life that you notice, it's like a pattern of behavior that shows up and you're not so proud of it. Yeah, it's not your favorite thing that you do. Maybe you have a quick temper, for instance, and you don't mean to go off. You certainly don't mean to go off on the people that are closest to you. And yet that's probably where that's showing up. Well, these are the kinds of things that are like, that would be a good problem focus for therapy. And why wouldn't you want this second part to also be present? You're in a good place. You know and are aware that this is an issue and you want to work on it. And your life is relatively balanced otherwise. And so we are working with you at a time where you're the most resourced for yourself. You see, therapy is not this magic box. You don't come in this office and sit on that couch and have me shut the door and I do some voodoo magic and poof, you feel better. That is not how therapy works, my friends. It has never been how therapy worked at all. So what I want to help you see is the best time to be in therapy is when you're actually doing relatively well. Not, perfectly. You've got this problem. You've got this issue that you want to work out. Not everything is perfect for you, but your skill set and your stress levels, they're there. They're there and they're doable for you to be working on this thing over here. Because ultimately what's going to happen is we are going to have to do a little digging. We are going to have to scratch that thing out of that tooth, right? So it may take some floss. It may take some elbow grease or some mental fortitude for you to actually correct the issue that you have. So it really helps us when you're in a good place. So to me, that's the optimal time to go and access mental health care. And as for going back to the insurance thing, most mental health professionals can fit that into a diagnosis that's a short-term diagnosis, like an adjustment disorder. And so, yes, it can be covered by insurance. It isn't just personal growth or coaching work, right? So that's why you might go to therapy, and I think is the optimal time to go to therapy. Now, the other time that is very common for you to show up across the couch from a therapist is when you're going through a really difficult time. So something, as I've said before, blew up in your life or imploded in your life, and now you are left with the pieces to fix for yourself, right? So if that's what you're finding yourself having difficulty with, and you are going to have to go in to see a therapist, I want to give you a heads up on what that therapist is most likely going to help you with from start to finish. First of all, let's come up with an example of a time like this. So probably one of the easiest, grabs for an example is when you're going through some kind of grief. Now, grief shows up for all sorts of reasons. I might do a podcast on this so that we can explore this further, but let me give you a little brief thumbnail sketch. Grief obviously shows up when we lose someone. That's kind of the common idea of what grief is or loss is. But it's not the only time that grief shows up. So it might be that somebody's died in your life. It could be a breakup. Maybe this person is still actually existing out here in the world, but they're not a part of your life anymore. That's a grief or a loss too. A little bit more ambivalent or ambiguous is how we would describe that clinically, but it's not as cut and dry as when somebody just has died, right? If it's a breakup, they're out there living in the world and you have all these feels about it, but they're still there. And that makes it a little bit more layered and nuanced in how you get through that. So those are a couple examples that are kind of right at the top. And most people would agree that's grief. There's other things that cause grief. Grief is caused when happy things happen in your life. What? This is why I'm going to have to do a podcast on this. But I think if you ask any parent as they watch their children age, yes, they know that there is loss. You're looking at this little 5-year-old and you're grieving the toddler and the babyhood that is not going to be there anymore. You're looking at somebody graduating high school and you're thinking, oh my gosh, no more shuffling around to baseball and basketball games. Oh, I'm going to miss that. There is something nostalgic about watching your child grow and being happy about that, but at the same time being sad about what is gone or in the past and is not coming back. So happiness, things like change that you want to have happen can cause grief. I know, mind blowing. And then there's these more subtle losses in our life, things like losses of jobs, losses of friendships, moving into a new environment, all sorts of things that are change related. And they might be neutral, like you're moving because you want to, maybe you wanted a new job. So again, that might be in that category of a positive thing that creates loss and grief. But it could just be more neutral and it could be negative. It could be you have to move because you can't afford the place that you're in anymore. So that will come with lots of other feelings on top of the grief that you're experiencing. But grief, to go back to why I brought this example up, grief is a good example of why people come in for therapy and they're not in their best, right? So we'll go with the one that's most common. Somebody's died in your life and you come in for therapy because you're grieving and you want help with that. What I know as a therapist, as you're sitting across the couch from me, is you're not in your best space, right? This is not optimal you who's ready to roll up their sleeves and get to work with some sort of mental fortitude that's going to help them make the changes that they're looking for in their life. No, this is somebody that just wants relief and is feeling just terrible at the moment. So there are two ways that I come at therapy early in helping somebody through something like grief. One is comfort, soothing, helping them learn ways to do that for themselves predominantly, but also within the context of therapy, offering that in the validation that I give them and the affirmation I give them that how they're feeling is normal and it's what I expect at this point after a loss like that. So we start with that kind of comfort soothing, and then we bridge into education. And that's really all you're ready for when you're in that state of mind where you're not at your 100% best. We'll just kind of bounce back and forth between soothing, and then I'll educate you a little bit on, have you tried this? Maybe think of it this way. Here are some things we know from science and research that help people at a time like this. And then we'll bounce back and I'll soothe and affirm and validate your experience and help you come up with ways in between our sessions to soothe and affirm and validate yourself, or reach out to the people in your social group to help soothe and affirm and validate you, right? So we bounce back between those two until I see you get to a spot where you are in a better space. You've got that mental fortitude and you're ready to dig in and help yourself with maybe some underlying ways that you think about the world or behave in the world that are not helping you in this grieving process. And then we can roll up those sleeves and kind of dig in a little bit more. Again, if you see what I'm saying here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to meet your need where you're at when you're not at your best, get you up to a place that's that optimal place that I was talking about for therapy, and then we'll dig in and do more of that therapy. So one thing that I'm going to mention, because I am a trauma therapist, as I've mentioned on this podcast before, a lot of people come into therapy for trauma thinking they're in the first category, that they are ready to roll up their sleeves. They have got that mental fortitude and they are going to go after it. You know, I was treated like crap by my mom and dad. I want to let go of that stuff. I don't like that it's getting in the way of the relationships that I'm having now, doc. So let's fix it. Let's get in there. But what I know to be true as I assess them is they're really more like the person who's coming in for grief. They don't have the skill sets yet. They don't have the fortitude yet. And they certainly aren't going to be ready for the level of work that you have to do to undo what trauma has left behind and heal yourself to move forward. So I'll spend a good deal of time in those places I described with the person who's having a grief response. First, we do soothing and validating and affirming, and then we kind of bounce into some education and we bounce back and forth with this until you have that fortitude.
Only sometimes I got to convince people that they don't have that fortitude yet, right? And this is where I think this mirror analogy helps the most. You're digging, and you don't realize that some of the stuff in your teeth that's bothering you isn't just the green stuff from the salad you ate, right? This is stuff that's way more deep than that. And we might need to do some x-rays, right? I'm taking this metaphor for all it's worth, my friends. But seriously, a mental health professional is really going to help you dig into, do you even have the resources available to you to really do this level of work? And if not, that is the work. And to help you understand that my building you up between this affirmation and soothing and self-care concepts, and then helping teach you about trauma and what we know and how it works and why it is so important that we do these other resourcing types of things. That's what I'm going to be helping you to see. And it is the work, and it's the important work. In fact, sometimes as a trauma therapist, that's all I need to do. And once we've created the neural pathways in the head for when this is activating you, this trauma response is showing up in your life, you've already got access to the places where we resourced and helped you to have a way of managing that. So we've made those neural connections just in that work bouncing between education and soothing work or comforting work. Resourcing work is what we call this in trauma therapy. So those are kind of 3 tiers of why people come in the door, what we'll be doing, what's the true thing that's happening in the black box, Doc, after I get into that room and you shut that door. These are the things that are happening that I want to just reaffirm. I want to go back to the beginning and reaffirm. Please think about being in therapy when there's just something that's kind of bugging you about you. And you're noticing it enough that you're realizing you're participating in it, but you're doing pretty well in your life. There's nothing huge, no big stressors, no big things that you have to manage. You've got some mental fortitude and could roll up those sleeves and get to work for yourself. If that's where you are, that's the best time to access therapy. You will see the quickest work happen, the quickest healing evident in that scenario than in the other two that'll be much more long-term and variable to the level of resource, the place where you're at. If you're not at your best, you really are just working to get you there, get you to your almost best, I suppose. And then we can do that deeper work. And that becomes a longer term therapy than if you come in when you've really got some skills about you and are ready to dig in to look at that thing that's kind of bugging you about yourself that you don't like so much anymore. I hope you found this helpful today. I hope it helps to, demystify some of the process of what goes on in therapy. And I just encourage you to keep listening, like and comment on this podcast, and certainly share it with some other people so that maybe they can say to themselves, okay, my life sucks, but now what am I going to do?
Because I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, I need to be sure that you understand this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and it is not a replacement for any mental health or medical therapy, counseling, or other treatments. I also want to be sure that if you are in crisis, that you seek out help. So I'm going to share with you here 2 different resources that you might use for yourself or someone else you know that's close to you in crisis. The first is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. You can find them at suicidepreventionlifeline.org online, or pick up the phone and dial 988. And you can talk to somebody right away if you're in crisis. Now, if you're somebody who doesn't like to pick up the phone to talk to somebody directly, there is also a crisis text line. You can find them at crisistextline.org online, or you can text HOME to 741 741, and you'll reach somebody right away to help you in crisis. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast, and I strongly encourage that you like and follow us wherever you find your podcasts. Share us if you like an episode and think somebody could use that information, and certainly leave a review if you feel like there's something that really resonated for you. It helps me when I see those reviews to make sure to have relevant material on the podcast that you want to hear about.